All right, we're going to start Chapter 15 today. The plan is to work on it today and tomorrow. If you look up on the screen here, I think this works. We will go over Chapter 15 this week, 16 the next week, 17 the next week, 18 the next week, 22. What we're going to do, we're in a way, we're going to combine 22 and 25 together. And what I mean is we're going to create a very simple MVC project that we're going to use the entity framework for, and then we're going to publish it right away so you can see what that's like before we even go into MVC into any detail, because I was watching this tape and I kind of doing an offshoot of that. All right. And I'm not sure if we're going to use Azure or not. I don't like it. So we might publish it to AWS, which is Amazon Web Services. All right, we might do that instead. All right, I'm checking them both out, and I'll let you know by 11/13. Now, on the 20th, we're just going to start during that week. We're going to start on Chapter 25, which is Model View Controller. All right, from then on, my hope is that probably for the rest of the semester, we'll spend like the 27th and then the 4th, the 11th, and the 18th. That's 4 weeks. We'll probably spend 2 days per week on MVC, and the other 3 days will probably be spent on the project. All right, so hopefully we'll have enough time to really get a good start or whatever on that project. So, all right, so I'm on page 527, and it's on how to use the details view and form view controls. What you're going to see when we go through this is there are a lot, and I mean a lot, of similarities between what we just looked at with the grid view and with what you see with the details view and the form view. Not only that, in just a couple minutes, we're going to look at master detail type of setup. And with a master detail type of setup, a lot of times you use a grid view for the master, and then the detail is either a details view or a form view. All right, again, this is meant to kind of, for lack of better words, especially for Brady and Evan, to kind of pique your curiosity or your interest as far as what you guys are doing for the interface part. So they mention here in this chapter, you'll learn to use both the details view and the form view. Most of it's on the details view. They spend the majority of the chapter on that, and then they get into the form view and they go, basically everything's the same. All right, so just so you're aware of that, because it's, like I said, there's a lot more. It's 528 to 564, but the form view isn't until 552, so it's the last 10 pages. All right. It says, although both of these are designed to work with a grid view, they don't have to. You can also use them with a drop-down list, or you can use them with a list box, etc. So there's other ways that these can be used if you're so inclined. So page 528, how to use the details view control. Everybody got a chance to copy the Chapter 15 stuff? Good. Okay. So if I turn up to the next page to right here, this is kind of what it looks like, but to actually show you it in even a little bit more detail, I'm going to turn up all the way to page... it is a ways up, to page 544. We'll come right back. Okay. So what you see on this picture here on the left is a grid view, very similar to what we did in the last chapter. When you choose the select on here, then it brings you the information for that particular record. So notice they've chosen P01 or POW01, Austin Powers, and then you get all of that information. Does that make sense? So again, this is kind of the master list, and then once you choose an option here, you get the details here. Now there's a lot of ways when you start to think about it that could at least possibly be incorporated into the project we're doing for the St. Charles County Economic Development Council. All right? But even especially with you guys, another couple things I want you to look at, or another thing I want you to look at when you get some time, is to look into Jquery data tables. because when you use data tables with jQuery, it literally is set up to be able to do searching. And I think that we might be able to do that with less work than you doing it this way. All right. So jumping back then. Again, this is what a details view control looks like. It's designed to display the data for just a single record. All right. So to do this, you've got to have some way to tell it what record you want to display. Now, in the example I just showed you, we had a grid view and you chose select. If you look on the screen here, or you look in your book on 529, now they've got a drop down. So as mentioned, there are plenty of different ways that you can do this. One thing we have to be really leery of too, I keep trying to nail Ms. Zika down as far as, and she was doing a better job last time. Well, if I had to, my druthers, these are the 5 things I'd really like. All right, but my worry is, considering we're not spending all of our time on this, and considering the fact that half the semester basically we're on day 35 is almost gone. I don't want it where it's out of day 80, we're on day 78, and we've got it 20% done. I'd like to be able to give her something that she's going to be able to use. If that means that we have to scale back on some of the stuff, then we do. All right, and we'll just see how it goes as we go on, because I'm not sure exactly, what the future, et cetera, is going to hold for this. So, again, they say the most common way of doing this is to either use a drop-down, like is on the screen right here, or a grid view, which is what I just showed you. All right, as you'd probably guess, we're going to need basically a data source for each one of these. Okay? All right. There's a lot of different ways that you can work with this too, just so you know, such as, it's not shown on here, but you can paginate with this. So if you want, you can do that. So there are so many tie-ins between this, the form view that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, and the grid view that we just talked about. They're very, very similar to one another. All right? Okay. It says you use the data source attribute to specify the data source that a details view should be bound to. All right. Then you're going to have, if you remember what we looked at in the last chapter, where we looked at that fields dialog box where you could see the different fields and you could add the command buttons and the like, it's going to be the same one that we just saw. The only difference in this is going to be when we go to the command fields, there's going to be one in there for an insert that we didn't see before. But other than that, it's going to look almost the same. All right. When you work with a details view, you can display it in one of 3 modes. All right. The first one, you can put it in read-only mode. Now that should be really obvious to all of you by now what displaying something in read-only mode would be. Now, again, if Ms. Zika or if somebody there is going to be looking at information and you know that the idea is not to change it, you probably want to set it up in read-only mode. Just, I say this, I've said this kind of thing before, to kind of protect yourself from yourself. That kind of an idea. All right. All right. There is an edit mode where you can modify the data for the current row, and there's insert row where you can enter data that will be inserted as a new row. All right. So when we look at this right here, we're in read-only mode. Does that make sense to people taking a look at that? All right. Then down below, you can see the fields. And again, we talked about this in the last chapter. These are bound fields, meaning they are not going to, basically, there's not going to be any editing done on them. All right. Let's see. A lot of this stuff looks very similar to what we'd seen earlier. All right. All right. Next, they go through here and they talk about some of the properties that you may want to work with on this. All right. Some of these were shown on the previous slide, but I went through it, just buzzed by it. The Datasource Id, I'm taking for granted by now everybody understands what that is. You know, when you add a data source, boom, it's going to have an ID associated with it. All right, data key names. Notice a list of the field names that form the property key for the data source. So by default, virtually all of the stuff we've worked on has been a single field. But again, if you had a concatenated primary key, it would be totally plausible for you to have more than one field in there. All right. The auto-generate rows. If true, the row is automatically generated. If false, you must define the rows within the fields element. And remember that if you say true right there, you've got less control over the look and feel of these. All right. The default mode, which we just mentioned, edit, insert, and read only, and allow paging, as mentioned, to set, if you set it true, it allows for paging. All right. And here's the different things. I'm not going to read any of these. All right. But it's another example when you look in here that there's a heck of a lot of stuff that you can set if you want to. All right. And you can set this stuff using straight CSS. This will work alongside or with Bootstrap, etc. So there's a lot of different ways that you can use this. Most of these elements provide styles and templates. As you can see, they control formatting and content. All right. The author mentions on the previous page that it's best to use these to format the control rather than CSS, rather than you writing your own CSS. The exception, again, is if you're using Bootstrap. All right, and then finally on the bottom of the page here, they talk about the fields child elements. All right, these describe the individual fields that are displayed. And we've talked about many of these. These look virtually the same as what you saw in the last chapter with a data grid view. All right. All right. Now, just like we did with the grid view, one bound field element is automatically going to be created for each column you have in the data source. So in other words, if you tell it you want to select 3 fields, there's going to be 3 bound fields. Does that make sense? In your data source, if you say select all and there's 8 fields, there'll be 8 of them, that kind of thing. All right. So again, you can work with that fields dialog box. Now that was way back on page 505. They don't replicate it, but it's the same one that we looked at before. So we have taken a look at it, all right? The enable paging, I don't think that's a real big thing. If you look on the next page here, you set the allow paging to true, and then you set the page setting mode, all right? So again, as you look in here, if you want to iterate your way through the details view, this way you can. I would suggest that if you're going to do this, there are ways of doing it to make it look a little nicer. Maybe you agree with what I'm saying, maybe you don't. But if you set it up like this, I think that's very hard for an end user to look at because everything is so crunched together, all right, that you might want to consider using first, previous, next, and last, the words, or at least trying to use some CSS to separate those things. Now, and this is what I mentioned when Ms. Zika was here last week. This talks about how to create a master detail page. All right? And again, typically with that, what you have is you have something, as we already mentioned, like a drop-down list or a grid view. The thing that's nice about the grid view is you get a look and feel of, you know, at least probably 10 records at a time. You've got a little better idea of what it is you're looking at. With a drop-down list, you only see the one, then you've got to choose the drop-down. But either one will work, all right? So it says here in this figure, they're showing how you can set up a master detail page where you get data items from a data source along with details for one of them, all right? And here's the thing. I don't want to read to you, okay? But I think people understand the idea of a master detail. In this case, for instance, you know, as an example, what we could have if we used a drop-down list, looking at that loan example that we have, we could set it up where you could have the loan officer, and then that would be there, and then in the details view, you would have all the customers for that loan officer. Or you would have the type of loan, and then in the details view, you would have all the people who have taken out that type of loan. Does that make sense? All right. And if you did it the other way with the details view, what we could have is we could have just the names of all people who had a loan. For example, just their names. And then we could click select, and then we could get all of their information. You know, their address, the type of loan, whether or not they're a veteran, etc. That kind of thing. Okay? So, I mean, I don't want to sound hokey, but in a way, it is only limited by your imagination as far as how you set it up. So they mentioned that a master detail page typically uses two data sources. The first is going to retrieve the items to be displayed by the control that's going to have the list, and the second, which will provide the data for the selected item. All right. Normally, it's going to use a parameter to specify which row should be retrieved from the database. So in other words, when we look at this second one, they're saying that you're going to have this. Does that make sense? You know, if you've got that link that says select, boom, whatever one you select, that's going to be at product ID, for example. It's going to be that current one. All right. So again, there's some good stuff here. You know, they try to explain it to you in some detail, and they kind of reiterate or rehash it on the bottom of the page there as well. All right. So next, how to update the data in a details view control. Okay. Again, you can use besides just displaying it, you can use it to edit, insert, and delete. So they give you here a little introduction to the command buttons, and they mention, much like the grid view, the details view control uses the command buttons. Thus, it provides edit, delete, update, and cancel. But in addition, it also provides, as you can see right here, you got the new button that comes out. With that new one, what they've done is they have selected update and they have selected insert. All right? So you've got, and I guess, delete. All right? One thing about this, and it may not sound like that big a thing, but, you know, especially those of you who are doing probably more of the interface work, make sure if you're going to have something like that on each page, let's say, be consistent, even with the placement of the buttons. People get used to things really fast. All right? And if you have on one page edit, delete, new, and then on the next page you invert them, so you've got new, delete, edit, somebody's going to screw it up. All right? The old saying, if people can find a way to screw it up, they'll find a way to screw it up. All right? All right, so the command buttons, I mean, there's an example of what it'll look like. And here's the buttons that are here. Again, the one that's new is that one. And notice what it says. Displays only in insert mode, inserts the data, then returns to read-only mode. Again, trying to protect you from you. And with that insert, the new is going to basically put you into insert mode. So that new that you click right there will put you into insert mode. All right? And it'll automatically provide for you a field for each record. Okay? And it's interesting, I've been looking at a lot of stuff online about this and running a lot of stuff that people have put out there, and by and large, most everybody who does this, they don't, you know how we've been using that is identity column? They don't do that. They actually put it out there and they make the user put in the ID. I don't understand the rationale for doing that. If you can have, if that field is going to automatically, just be incremented for you, why make the user do that? So what I'm saying is, like the way I'm looking at it is for this, for the thing for St. Charles County, I would see no reason for us to make them add an ID number. I don't know if you agree with that or not, but to me it just makes more sense to have them not do it. Anything that can be automated for them should be automated for them. All right? So if we have a thing in there where they're able to add a new contact, we're going to the primary key in there is going to be contact ID. Yeah. But they shouldn't have to add that, is what I'm saying. They shouldn't have to. If we make it an is identity field that automatically increments from 1, it'll make it for them. And what I'm saying is they could still print them out if they wanted to. I don't know what, that's an unintelligible field, basically. I don't know why they're going to need those. all right, other than for querying and whatever. But I don't think that anybody, if you ask Ms. Zika, hey, who's customer or whatever, or member number 38, she won't know, and she won't care, all right? So the details view, as you can see, it has 6 different command buttons. Not only that, when you start to use those, what you're going, it says you can use the auto-generate delete, auto-generate edit, auto-generate insert, etc. to automatically generate these for you. So what that means is, remember, there's 3 ways that you can do this stuff, okay? And they are, you can hand code it. I've done a lot of that. Maybe you don't like doing it that way, which is fine, all right? Or you can use wizards, or kind of a hybrid between the two. When you start to add your command buttons, just so you look, hopefully this makes sense, that when this comes up right here, which one is it? When you first do this, this button right here, when this comes up, this button right here that shows, the one that says show cancel button, that one's grayed out by default. Okay, the show cancel. As soon as you choose any one of these, it'll be ungrayed. Okay, but what they're saying is when you set this up, you can do this any way you want. And notice, choose a command field type. If you are going to choose one of those 6 built-in ones that we just looked at, you'll want command field. And if you don't want them to appear as buttons, you can click the down arrow here and also have them appear as hyperlinks, if you'd rather have that. All right? They don't show it in here, but that's the way that it is set up. Does this look familiar? Remember we talked about when something ends with ing, you're going to use that for your validation. When it ends in ed, you're going to basically check to see if there were any kind of errors when you tried to do an insert, or when you tried to do an update, or when you tried to do a delete. So you're going to be checking that affected rows. So in other words, these things are going to pretty much correspond to the code that you see down here. All right? And you're going to see that code when we go through the examples in just a few minutes too. All right. Just like we saw with the grid view, you can work with template fields. So if you want more control, and this is actually a really good example on 543. If you look at the one on the left, what you notice is this long description, it's so long that it gets truncated. Whereas down here, they set it up as a template field, and they made it a text box that was multi-row. All right, so you could see more of it. Now, you could say, well, it's wasting area. That's not that big a thing. The other big thing is this, right here. Under the category ID, notice here, you have to type it in. Here, it's a drop-down. Again, keep that in mind, when especially those of you who are working on the interface. We're trying to make this thing as simple for them to use as possible, because it's not going to be just used by her. All right, maybe initially it'll be used just by her, but the idea is, if we can add to it, it'll be used by everybody who works there. And according to her, she called them lazy, and I don't know, if that's what it is, if they're lazy, if they don't care or what. But we want to make it so it's as hard for them to screw it up as they can possibly screw up. All right. So these are the different templates that you can use with this. And when you do want to customize, so what the author is showing is from what you have up here on the bottom of 543, they're showing what it looks like. All right. So again, remember, the key thing to remember is you want to use these edit item templates if you want to do customization. All right. All right. Next then, we're going to take a little bit of a look here at this product maintenance application, and it goes, for the next almost 10 pages. But as it says, It shows the operation of the product maintenance application. It uses a grid view to list all of the products on the left side of the page, all right? And it uses paging to allow you to scroll through. When the user clicks the select button for any product, the details for that product are displayed in the Details View Control on the right-hand side of the page. Then, as it says, you can use the edit or the delete buttons to do one of those operations. So in other words, it looks like this. All right. So let me bring my copy of it up. I think I'll have to use their copy. I don't think I have mine here. So this is product maintenance. I don't know if any of you care, or I can show you this later, not right now, but I'll just bring it up now. Yeah, I know, there's not a problem with that drive, just... My students had to turn in their midterms today. So these were the midterms that they did for my daughter for her wedding. You can see what they've done here. Some of them look really, really nice. So I told her yesterday she was the one who was going to pick the winner. She didn't think there was a big thing about it until I told her the winner's getting $100. She said, I don't want to pick the winner. That isn't fair. I said, you're picking it. I'm not going to be involved.
It'd probably be more fair that she fixed it.
That's what I thought. I said, you're the one who's going to hopefully use it. The funny thing is that picture that was on the front, virtually everyone used the same one. You know, was when he's down on one knee proposing to her. So again, if we run this, so the idea is I can click select here and I can change. So if I want to go here to Freddie, okay, pretty obvious what's happening there. Okay. And also notice there's a new. So if I want to do that. Now I haven't tried this, but I'm going to try it. I'm going to put in P0 or POW01. See that right here? I'm purposely going to try to put in something that I know should fail to see what happens. Oops, that's not going to work. Now, according to that, it looks like it took it. So I'm going to go to the end here. There wasn't a message at the bottom? Okay, good. That's good. Because it should be checking for that. All right? All right. So again, as mentioned, this would be your prototypical type of master detail. All right, let me cancel that. So you come in here, your master, your detail. What I think you guys were talking about was if you were going to do something like this, you'd put the master up on top and the detail down below. All right. But when we take a look at the corresponding code, one thing to notice is if we do take a look in here, let me go first to the actual C# code. What do we have? Well, when you're updating, this says you're attempting to update, and if you attempt to update and it doesn't work, all right, in other words, that exception should not have anything in it if you attempt to do an update and the update works. So if there is something in it, all right, you're going to have an error label there where you're going to put that message. And what this is going to do is basically allow you to back out, for lack of better words. All right. Otherwise, if that's true, you attempted to go and do an update? You attempted to do an update, but it failed. And the reason that it would fail would be because of the concurrency you had set up that two people are trying to update the same record at the same time. And it doesn't want to overwrite one's changes with the other, so it's just going to give you a message. And if you get down to here, it worked. Does all that make sense? So there's 3 cases, 2 of which would result in failure. All right. Now that's for an update. For a delete, well, again, if there was a problem, why would there be a problem deleting? It may be that you don't have permission. You may have select permission, all right, but you may not have update, insert, or delete permission. And it's different. I mean, I've heard of really weird stuff. I did a thing during a summer many years ago, probably 15 years ago, where I was doing some work for this health company that was out of Oak Brook, Illinois. And they had some people there that had edit and delete. They had select, edit, and delete, but they didn't have insert capabilities. So in other words, they were working with medical records from all over the world. So their people could go in, and if a person's name was spelled wrong or a zip code or something, they could change that. All right? And they could delete if they were told to delete something, but they couldn't add new things because there were different people who had the ability to do that.
I'd be more afraid to give somebody a delete option.
Yeah. Yeah. But some of the people who had insert, that's the only one they had. And I said, well, what do they do then if they put in a record that they didn't mean to put in? And they had to literally write up a thing so that one of the people with delete permission could delete it for them. And I said, why is it? And the answer was, it's always been like that. Okay. And it's, yeah, you're paying me money. Okay. But same kind of thing. If there's an exception, otherwise, if the affected rows, otherwise it worked. And you'll notice that it's in updated, and it's in deleted, and it's in inserted. So it's after the operation has taken place. All right? And again, same kind of thing in here. Now, in the deleting, now what we're doing is we're saying, okay, if you didn't put in a unit price, all right, if the unit price is not equal to null, and what you're basically saying here is, are you able to convert it? All right, if it's not equal to null, all right, you're attempting to do the convert here. Now, what you'll notice when you look in here is, let me double check. So one of them I thought did and one of them didn't. They have required field validators in here, and I was trying to remember if they had just required field or if they had types. And I believe that was all they had, were just required field validators for all of these. All right. You all know what required field validators do. You know what all those validators do. All right. But you'd probably want to be making some kind of checks too, because if you're going to update, the delete's not a big thing, but if you're going to update or if you're going to insert, you shouldn't allow, with all this stuff that's in here, product ID, etc., the unit price, you might have a minimum unit price. That makes sense? So you might have a range validator. All right, maybe that the most expensive thing you could have would be $1,000. But the cheapest thing you have is $10, so you could set up a range validator. The quantity on hand, you'd want to make sure that was an integer. You would want to make sure that that was not less than 0, all right? But there's all sorts of other things that you might want to check on that too. So it says the application uses a grid view and a details view control to let the user update the data in the products table. All right, to select a product, you locate the product in the grid view, click the select button. You've seen that already. All right, that displays the details for the product in the detail view control. Then you can click edit if you want to change any data, or you can click delete to delete the product. Again, there is nothing that is being put in there to my knowledge. So if we come in here one more time, I might have to run it again.
I think he closed out of the room. It came up. Probably have to start it over.
All right. Yeah, it did come up pretty quickly. So if I put in new here, okay, and I'm going to put in a brand new product. So let's say POW99. Whoa. All right. So did it put that in? I guess I have to look, and it would actually be at the bottom
Yep. In the middle.
in the middle. Right there, right? Yep. Okay, so if I click this, if I select it and I click delete, it's just gone. The reason I'm bringing that up is, especially for you two, I'm sure she's not going to want that. Okay? So you would have to put a check in there. Okay? And for example, you would put it probably in the item deleting. You could put up, the equivalent of some kind of an alert box or something and say, you're about to delete this, and you can't give them too much information. You are about to delete this record with this. At least you'd want to put down the primary key or something about it. If they're deleting a contact, that kind of thing. The other thing you might want to ask her, and this is one of those things where, yeah, I'd like to ask her this, and yeah, she'll probably say yes, but then it's going to be more work for you. Typically I don't know if you know this or not, typically when you delete things like that, not in their example, but in the real world, you don't really delete it. You just make it so you cannot see it. Yes. And then what you typically do is either every week or every month or every day, depending on how many you're deleting, you take those and you move them off to a log file. So that stuff is there. And, I don't think it hasn't happened before, like with an insurance company. Somebody leaves you, they go to another company, they're not happy, they come back to you. They should be able to recover all of that information. And as an example, when I moved from Wisconsin to Illinois to Wisconsin to Illinois, I did it like 4 or 5 times. Every time I would go from one to the other, I would always have the same driver's license number. They didn't get rid of mine in there. It was logged someplace. All right? And I'm saying we should be doing the same thing.
So are we going to do the same thing with this?
No, what I'm saying is we want to set it up probably, so we'll have to look at that, but I'm sure you can go and Google it, but we'd have to do the equivalent of, like I said, putting up some kind of an alert and just say, you're about to remove this. Are you sure you want to? But again, not to be funny, if they say yes, you're not going to say, are you really sure? But it's just going to be one time. They get one chance to back out. And then what do we do if they back out? That's going to be up to her. She might ask a question like that. Well, what happens to those? Are they really removed? But you could do the same kind of thing where, when you look at that table, I was surprised when she showed her members. I didn't think that 2,466 was very big. I don't know if you agree with that or not. I don't think it was very big at all. And what you really could do then is like we said, if you can make it invisible or just have it not show, that would probably be the best of all worlds. Because by the time it gets that big where it would be an issue, she won't be working there, and you guys will be someplace else, and I won't even be probably on this earth anymore. All right? So I wouldn't worry about it. Now, the default ASPX is shown in the book on pages 546. And again, the newer stuff, not newer, but you see you're using the grid view. There's the data source. All right. And here's the data. There's the actual data source right there. And then so on the first page, they're showing the master, and then the detail is shown on the next couple pages here. But you'll notice that it's a good news, bad news situation. The bad news is, man, there's a boatload of code. The good news is when you start to drag the stuff out, much of it gets created for you. All right. So next they start to show here, starting on 550, they talk about the code behind, and it's really shown on all of 551. All right. Now that's not new. We've already talked about this stuff. There should be nothing that's in there that surprises anybody. All right. If you try doing it and you get an error, all right, show it in some kind of a label someplace. Okay. And don't allow them to continue. All right. If they try to do it and it fails, put something else in that label. Otherwise, it worked. And that's what they're saying on 550 and 551. All right. Tell you what, let's take about a 10-minute break. Let's come back at 1:40 and we'll pick it up on page 552, talking about the form view.